Welcome to the video lecture for Topic 4 in Engaging and Living the Biblical Story. In this topic, we are looking at Act 2 of the biblical story, the Fall. In this video, we will explore how the Fall shows us the world as it is now, and see how it shows us the need for a Savior. If you have not already done so, please complete the reading of Genesis chapter 3 before continuing with this video. In the story of Genesis 3, we see the fall affecting both humanity and the world. First, let's look at humanity. Because of the fall, human nature now contains sin. This fundamentally breaks our relationship with God, who is holy and cannot tolerate sin in his presence. Sin affects the human condition now extensively, meaning to every part. It does not, thankfully, always affect us intensively. That is to say, not everyone is as evil as they can be, and yet every part of us is affected by sin. While good remains in the world and in the human condition, it is now all tainted with the effects of the fall. Importantly, the fall did not eradicate the image of God, as discussed in Act 1, Creation. We can see after the fall, for example in Genesis 9:6, that people are still called the image of God. Our creation purpose remains in the fall, but it is now more difficult. It is marred. The beauty and harmony of human relationship, of working and keeping God's good earth, is now difficult. Pain, toil, aging, death, among other things, now affect the human condition and make it more difficult to be the people God has created us to be. Beyond the effects of just humanity, we see that the fall also impacted the world. Paul in Romans chapter 8 talks about creation longing for the day when it will be redeemed. The world around us has been changed through the fall. Just like us, no part of the universe is now untouched by the effects of sin. No part is precisely as God intended it to be. Again, it is important to say that good remains in the world, and God's goodness and grace are evident even in the fall story. Notice that Adam and Eve in Genesis 3 are kicked out of the garden, but their lives are preserved. They are allowed to have children. The human race is allowed to continue. Plants still grow, but now childbearing is painful. Growing plants is difficult. These things are still there. God's grace and goodness are evident then and still evident today. The tension of sin and God's grace is a key part of the biblical story going forward, where both will continually be in tension with one another. Now, in addition to the changes to the world, as we move from the way God intended the world to be in Act 1 to the way the world is now in Act 2, a key theological truth reveals itself: the fact that humanity needs to be saved. It is important to note that Adam and Eve were created without sin, and yet were still tempted by the idea of becoming more like God. The serpent, by deceiving them, leads them to believe that they can do better than God in determining their own path. This failure is replicated time and time again throughout the Old Testament, where humanity shows that it is in need of a Savior, but incapable of doing the lifting and saving themselves. Thankfully, God, in his infinite wisdom, shows us even in the fall story that he is present. In Genesis 3:15, God tells the serpent that one day there will be a seed of the woman, and that seed will crush the serpent's head. This is known as the proto-evangelion in Greek, or the first gospel. It is the hint that God is not done with humanity, and the biblical story will continue to our third act, in which Jesus Christ comes and redeems. And that is the topic of next week's video. Thank you for listening.